So I'm Andrew Wells, and I'm a contemporary artist working in Greenville. I'm a graduate student there. And I'm going to stop for a second because let's think back. I counted 4 ums in the first 10 seconds if anyone caught on that quickly and started counting before me. So I'd like to admit something to everybody. I'm not good at talking to people anymore. I used to be. What I used to be able to do, I could be here, I could look in front of me, see somebody coming towards me, we would make eye contact, have a little chat, and then we'd be on our way. Now what happens is I start over here, and I see somebody like, I see this guy right here in front of me. But I'll see him, I'll recognize there's a person in front of me about 10 feet away. But instead of talking to them, I pull out this thing. And instead, I'll pretend to send a text message instead of actually talking to another human being. And the point of that is, I got a text message right now as I'm talking. Now the point of that little demonstration is, phones and the things that I can do with them have not only, they've changed the way that I talk to people, but there's nothing inherently weird about having the things that I can do with them and great. The important thing is that they've changed my mindset. So now, instead of the mindset, oh, there's a person, so I'm going to be a human with them for a second, for about 10 minutes. Instead of desiring that, now my instinct is to actually avoid them, because, why would I talk to their face when I can talk to their Facebook profile? I can talk to their face on a screen. We can have this anonymity between the two of us. And why even stop there? Why talk to one person on Facebook when I can post a status on Twitter and I can talk to 100 people at the same time? While I'm doing that, I'll take a photograph on Instagram. I'll take a picture of my artwork or something. Take a photo of Instagram, post on there. Now they can see what I'm doing. And later tonight I'll go on Tinder and I'll have a date for tonight. Why do anything personally with another human being when I can just be fully digital? Now, like I said earlier, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. Talking to 100 people at the same time, that's great, right? You can send something important. But the thing is, what do we do with that ability? So I made a video piece up there. I'm assuming that a lot of you have seen it, but if you haven't, I'll explain it. So the video up there is, I went on Facebook and Twitter to answer my own question. I wanted to know, what do we do with that ability? Like, what is it that we actually do? So I went on Facebook and Twitter, mostly Facebook, and I would look at what my friends did. So for 2 weeks, I had a little notebook and I would record every single status they posted. And later on I sifted through to use the most obnoxious that I could find. And it's people, instead of saying useful things, they complain about their coffee, they complain about their picture of Axl Rose they were going to send their friend on their phone doesn't work. They don't say anything that has substance anymore. So having this ability to talk extremely quickly, going back to what that does, it's changed how we value things. Because people aren't naturally anything. Everything you do is a learned behavior, like you picked it up from somewhere and now you're acting on it. So the technology didn't do anything, it's the way that we practice it. So that leads me to making, after I did the videos where I made the audio forms of what people said and recorded myself talking it, I started working with text. So what's going to happen now, instead of using audio, if I take it back to a traditional medium like drawing? So I have another picture of my face crying, and then behind all of you, the graphite drawing of myself holding my phone, and then the one beside that, the baby who's crying while not having any notifications. The next thing you'll notice is, why am I in 3 of my pieces? Why am I in 5 of my pieces? Because I have 3 videos. Why I'm in 5. The question that I get a lot is, I'll tell them that I'm making satirical work, making fun of what they do on social media, so they take it a little bit personally. So their response to that, they don't know where to go. They tell me, well, aren't you just complaining about people complaining? And that's fair to say. But the way that I answer that question is, that's why I put myself in the work. So that's why it's my mouths saying the things that other people say. That's why it's my face crying about hating my phone, it sucks, I didn't get any likes on Facebook. That's why it's me excited about whatever he's looking at on his phone. Is because I'm not autonomous from anything. Like, I'm not above the culture that everybody else practices. Like, I'm in the thick of it with everybody. And my position on that, it really goes back to the concept artists from the 60s and 70s. So that's, people also ask me, they'll say, why do you make art about social media? Why is that worthy of putting into a gallery space? And I look at it as, I want my art, if it's going to be shown to the public in a gallery space, why does it not deal with things that you guys know about? Like, if it's going to be in public, I should talk about what the public knows. So, as obnoxious as all of this is, because it has to be to accurately reflect what we do, I look at how we place value on things. So how social media has changed what we value. It's not that we value human interaction lower, it's that we view our digital interaction as higher now. It goes back to that why should I question. Now, I did social media work, I did satire, funny things for about my first year in graduate school. Now I've moved on to this series. So far there's 3, there's 2 more in my studio space. I'm going to continue it on together. But this is a new series that I'm doing. I actually got the idea from talking to one of my friends. I was talking to her about it, actually. And, I was explaining to her, I did a lot of work with social media and talking about how that form of media changes the way we think. I want to move on to something else. Like, what else can I talk about? So we talked about social political issues, like sexism, racism, homophobia, things of that nature. And I thought, okay, I like that, so where do I go after that? So I started looking at, similar to how I looked at digital media, now I moved on to looking at where am I going to find the things that influences these behaviors. So what things make us specifically sexist for this piece? And I started looking at internet advertisements to the Hardee's commercial with the woman. They were able to sexualize food somehow, so it would have a person biting slow motion into a sandwich. I went online and I found Calvin Klein ads. They'll have a woman and a man taking each other's clothes off. And then beside that, it will say beauty, and underneath it will be a cologne bottle or perfume bottle. And then I was driving one day, and I looked up, and what I saw was a giant Calvin Klein billboard with the same thing in all these people's faces now, no longer digitally. So advertisements are doing the same thing to make these values as social media was doing to change our values. So the next step with these pieces, now that I knew what I was going to talk about, I got together with her and I asked her if she would help me with this. So she chose how she would look in the photograph. She chose the positioning, what sort of expression would be on her face, everything. And then she sent me the photo and I made a drawing of it. I think of the drawing, the graphite portion of it, in terms of how long it takes. So that's why I use graphite, because when you see the graphite drawing, you can make some sort of estimate. And I think of that as the amount of time that it took the two of us to really get to know each other, and in her position, how long it took her to develop herself as a person, like if she's happy where she is now, because she dealt with some issues a few years ago, and you build yourself slowly from that. And then I took acrylic paints painted over that. So I look at paint in these images as being the graphite underneath it is how we view ourselves in culture, and the paint is culture's stereotypes going over us and affecting how, say for example, I think of myself one way, right? But now, someone that I meet, the cultural influences is the lens that they're viewing me through. And that lens is built up through things like advertising. So this piece, I handled the same way. This is a friend of mine, Jonelle. Her name's Antoinette. This is Michael. So I did a piece with Jonelle. After I did a piece about sexism, I wanted to move on. So now I was talking about the racial situation that we're in. You know, the events like Charleston shootings, African-American youth getting killed on the street and things. So I talked to Jonelle and what he thinks about it. So with his, I didn't want to resort to using derogatory slurs over his image. Because what I do with these pieces is these three people, they tell me stories about how common stereotypes and thoughts from the media affect the way they're perceived by the people around them. So they tell me stories, and he told me, you know, things that people have said to him on the streets as a result of him being a different race than they are, or in a different group than they are. And the stories he told me gave me the obvious options that I had, so placing like derogatory things. But I didn't want to go that route. What we decided on is to use, or I decided on to use a symbolic image. That's why you have the blue lines Xing out his eyes and the red slash over his face with a white background. To talk about how these values as a result of cultural influences come into play here. Now this one was interesting. They were all interesting to me, but this one made me think about how I viewed the statement that he gave me. So this was the same process Michael and I talked about. But he told me stories that were a result of his homosexuality. So he told me things about, you know, people coming on the street to him, yelling derogatory slurs, yelling at him, calling him a faggot and things in the streets. But same with him, I didn't want to resort to that. So I asked him, okay, so I don't want to use those stories because then I'm getting things that I don't want to, you know, we don't want to make an image that's just playing too much into the ideas. We want to come up with something different. So I asked him, what are things that people tell you on a day-to-day basis? You know, one-liners that people use to insult you, things you've heard hundreds of times. So this is his, are you a boy or a girl? So when he gave me the statement, he told me how he feels about it. And the interesting thing about it was when he told me was that I really questioned it. I thought, that's not that serious of a thing to say. It's not as serious as, it doesn't have as much implications, but that's what I thought. But the way he explained it to me was that, you know, he looks the way that he looks over, years of conflict with accepting his homosexuality and talking about it to people around him. So it took him, like, this is his appearance that he has built himself over years. And a random person can just crush that immediately with such a simple question. And it was interesting to me that I didn't take it that seriously, and I think it's because, you know, with Jonelle and Antoinette, she's a woman, he's an African American. The group that they belong in, other than my own, which is white, male, it's viewed as, or I view it, and I think the way other people view it, is that these differences are obvious. So of course I can't insult her for being a woman, of course I can't insult him for being African American, but the way him and I talked about it is that even people who accept homosexuals still have this little thought in the back of their mind where it's like, well, you know, he doesn't have to be, does he? And that's such a weird thing for me to think, because I'm, you know, completely okay with him being however he wants to be. It's like he didn't choose to be that way, that's the way he is. So it was strange to me how even my cultural baggage came with me when he told me this story. So what I would like to do next is I'm still continuing these stories. And what I'll do is I have started to gather information. So people, they'll see these pieces. I've had random people send me stories and things through my email address. So I kind of collect stories, and when I find one, I'll get with that person and I'll make another image like this. So actually, if you guys can help me after you leave, this is actually a serious request. It sounds like a joke. But add me on Facebook after I just talked about all this stuff, because that's really, I enjoy this way of talking to the public about public issues. Because these guys are all my friends, but what's going to happen when I involve other people? So how would I make a piece now in response to someone I have no idea who they are sending this to me? So I want everybody to do that. Let's not do it seriously. But I just want to say thanks for everybody coming out. I just randomly started doing this talk. It was going to be a little bit later, but it was good. I enjoyed talking to everybody, and thanks for coming.